It's the only reason I can justify my existence here. And I look, why am I here? What function does this serve? You know, to be a human being on the planet. And the only thing I can come up with that's halfway reasonable.
The meaning of life.
Yeah, well, is to uplift and nurture all life.
We're here. We're in Austin. This is Joe Marshalla, my good buddy. I'm Garrett Wilner. We're just going to have a conversation. Joe, welcome to this Eckhart Tolle kind of park bench.
Conversation with Joe.
Yeah, well, it's a good conversation. You just finished this incredible film.
Yeah.
Frequency of Genius. And let's start with that word. Genius in the dictionary, or at least one of the dictionaries, speaks of a person with incredibly high intellect and talent.
Mm-hmm.
But you seem to have a more down-to-earth, more approachable definition of genius.
Yeah, when I think of genius, I mean, that's how we have characterized it in academia, as this high level of, intelligence. And really, I think it's more of an innate intelligence, something that's within all of us. And that it really consists more of, I think of genius as someone who's capable of original thought. And in order to be capable of original thought, one must be their authentic self. And in order to be their authentic self, one must be no longer identified with their mind. And what I mean by that is that there's so many conversations going on in our brain, so many conversations going on with how we should be, how we could be, how we ought to be. All of those should, would, coulds, ought tos, all of that programming is the very thing that we have to let go of. And that everyone that we admire, from the Einsteins to the Gandhis, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, on and on, the list goes on and on. Each one of them were their authentic self. Each one of them leaned against those consensus realities that are the kind of control mechanisms or the buffering mechanism for society. And as a result of them being their authentic self, being sincere to the truth as they could feel it and understand it, we then consider them a genius. But they were doing nothing more than just being who they were here to be, and each one of us has that opportunity. So I believe that the genius factor, or the frequency of genius, that which we consider genius, is everyone's birthright, and everyone has the opportunity to bring forth their authentic self, therefore giving us the gift of their reason for being here on the planet in the first place.
Language is kind of a difficult thing. At best, it can kind of point towards something, and then you must jump off of that and land where it really intends for you to go. We've got a lot of different words that sort of nibble towards this word genius. For example, there's the word savant. And then we have IQ tests that measure various different facets of IQ and so-called genius. And then we have this thing called enlightenment. I wonder if you could kind of put a ribbon and a bow around all of this and kind of pull it all together for us.
When we look at art, we think of art as something that moves us or stirs us. And generally what is being represented is that two unrelated items somehow come together to create a metaphor, to create an extension of understanding. And so within our minds, we have what we call, the left brain and the right brain, two different activities that are occurring. The left brain is very linear and very logical, and the right brain is very creative and expansive. And so when we are able to take two non sequiturs and bring them together, we have what we call art or metaphor. And so a genius or a savant or someone of that way have open access to both sides of the brain simultaneously. The wiring is free to make these free associations between two things that normally wouldn't come together, but when brought together in a special way, create a whole new understanding, a whole new extension of knowledge, a whole new extension of our ability to relate to this reality. The measurements, the tests, really all they do is they're really just kind of measuring the level of connectivity that's within the brain, the level of connectivity to the akasha, the field of energy that is the storage facility for all knowledge. They really don't measure anything other than that, other than just that connectivity and that capability. It isn't a measure of the human being. It isn't a measure of, whether or not they're more enlightened, if you will. What it measures is their ability to make a free association of connectivity and to elevate our understanding of what's going on. Now, in regards to enlightenment, I guess enlightenment would be the ultimate understanding that this thinking thing, this brain, this conversation that's going on in our head, that you can see it, hear it, taste it, smell it, think it, believe it, conceive of it, that whole aspect of our being, someone who we considered enlightened is no longer identified with that. They see that is just, that comes with the body. That's part of the physicality, that's part of the biocomputer, it's part of the brain that we get as human beings, but by no means is that who you are. And so someone who is no longer identified with that, who's free of that association, is that which we considered enlightened. And I don't know that enlightenment is something that you actually achieve. My dear friend, one of my best friends, Dr. Harold Bloomfield, he rarely uses the word enlightenment. He uses the word enlightening. That it's a continuous process. And this process that we're going through here on the planet in the evolution, we keep on looking for like that marker that says we've made it, we've accomplished it now, like it's done. And the truth is that evolution isn't something that has occurred or that will occur. Evolution is something that is happening right now, right this very moment. We are evolution, and as a result of us right now being evolution, that everything is in that constant flux. Everything is in that constant change, and that's where the law of repeatlessness comes in, that every moment is fresh and new, that nothing is repeating. And so there's no stagnant kind of like achievement per se. There is no someone who has accomplished genius. There is the action of genius. There's not someone who has accomplished enlightenment. They are being enlightening. They are in their enlightening. And there's not someone who has, really achieved anything. The moment we put that static kind of it's done, we're then completely associated with the mind, and we've denied the truth of our reality, that every moment is fresh and new, and every moment is changing, and every moment we have the opportunity to alter our course and alter our perception. And if we're not, then we're basically dead.
That you started this answer with a reference to art and artwork. And one thing that might be true is that a lot of artwork is built on a strong mental concept. And maybe let's see what this looks like with this square on top of this circle and this color and that sort of thing. And it seems to be a linear mental progression behind it. And the artwork seems to have lost that unspoken, that spark, that creativity. And so I'd like to ask you to speak to that for just a moment, but let me ask you about the word creativity. What exactly is creativity, and where does it originate within the human?
Okay. I'll address the art first. I think that we've mechanized art. and then as a result of it being commercialized, that we have now created these systems for analyzing art and the way the tones and the shapes and the relationships and the proportions and all that. That's what makes it art.
So the
right?
heart is missing.
Yeah. And that some of the most beautiful art I've seen, I mean, a dear friend of mine who just started painting for the first time in her life, and over the last 2 years, she has no lessons whatsoever, has no idea how to hold the brush, has no concept of color, none of the training per se. She just turns on some music and feels, emotes these strokes and does things and mixes acrylics with oils and oils with watercolors. I mean, all these things you're not supposed to do. And her work is some of the most fascinating work you'll ever see. Everyone is touched by her paintings. They're like a true emotive aspect of her expression in that moment. And so creativity ultimately is the free expression of one's authentic self. It is doing for the sake of doing. It is doing for the sake of a sense of unedited, uninhibited, just free expression of one's core vibration in relation to the world. And so sometimes that core vibration might be very agitated and frustrated with an event, with the governments, with starvation or something like that. And so you'll see there's an emotive color. There's the frequencies that are associated with that kind of vibration, that dense vibration of things that are awful. You'll see those same vibrations being expressed in the strokes or the hard edges or the colors that they choose or the contrast that happens. And when someone's doing something that's really particularly beautiful and peaceful and harmonious, all of a sudden the vibrations of the painting, the strokes, the speed at which it's painted, all of that, it's like a tape recorder, if you will. It's taping, the canvas itself becomes like a tape of that emoted feeling, which then can be played back over and over and over continuously. And so ultimately creativity is just it's the conveying of one's personal relationship to their experience of the here and now with this dimension of what we call reality.
So is there a distinction between creativity and originality?
I don't think so. There shouldn't be. Creativity and originality, in my opinion, are synonymous. They truly are. To be truly creative, one needs to be original. And to be original just means that you're just doing what you feel. You're not thinking, what's someone going to think about this, and is that right or is that wrong? There's no editing going on. There's no inhibition in that regard. And so without editing or without inhibition, then one is truly being authentic, and if they're being authentic, they're being original. If they're being original and they're expressing it, then we call that creativity.
So there might be levels of originality. Someone might be expressing 70% originality in that moment, authenticity, if you will, creativity.
Yeah, we are affected by what we've taken in, the data that comes in, and there might be some other painter or some other song or some other photograph or something in nature that captures kind of that sense or that feeling, with inside ourselves. And so there is some overlap, I think, that you'll find from one artist to the next. Yet it's taking those impressions that are stored in your memory banks and then relating your free self in relation to kind of those expressions. And so you'll see kind of a proportionate, similarity to somebody else's work, or a blending of colors, or a stroke, or something of that nature. And so, and we do have those, though, who are truly original. That are just like off the charts original. And you look at it and say, wow, what plane of reality are they on? Someone who gives me that kind of feeling is Alex Gray. If you've ever seen Alex Gray and the Sacred Mirrors and some of his work. The fellow is definitely painting from a place of consciousness that fortunately he's able to tap into, because it actually acts as a kind of a guidepost or a map for other people to begin to relating to this reality, from his perspective. I mean, there's lots of original, but that's just one that touches me in particular.
I'm thinking of Robin Williams, an incredible comedian.
Right.
Just outrageous where he channels this intellect of his.
Yeah.
Which brings me to a question, what is humor?
Well, humor is what we were talking about with taking two unrelated items and bringing them together in a way that no one anticipates to bring forth a new, it's an unexpected relationship, if you will, between two things, and it's ultimately a metaphor.
Look at what you have there, a little TV tray. Let's see what's on the television. It looks like that revolves around, Rolex. Welcome to Disney's Hall of Presidents.
And so frequently you'll find that humor is, it's based in surprise. It's based in, you think that something's going in this way, in this direction, but then when it gets right to the point, it switches direction and catches you kind of off guard.
So why do we find that funny? Did I catch you off guard?
Yeah, you caught me off guard, man. Because it takes us all to a place of like a playful vulnerability. Where we can be vulnerable together and accept that we didn't expect that, and thrust us very much into the now, very much into the present moment. And I think we all have a need to, our brains are looking for moments to, release the serotonins and the endorphins and all these other kind of things. And so it's really kind of built on this tension that you build by you're building something that might be uncomfortable for someone to be thinking about, and you're you're taking in one direction, and then in this release of the tension, but it's a safe release. It's like this tension's building up, but then you safely release this tension, and that, I believe, is what we call humor.
Yeah, there's another form of humor that comes to mind here. Perhaps it's in the same vein. You can speak to that, but it's kind of like Schadenfreude or slapstick. The Three Stooges comes to mind right away. The three guys trying to walk through the door at the same time, and woo, 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 and,
yeah.
And some people find that horrendously funny, and usually men. And usually women, if you want to generalize a little bit, say, they just don't get it, it's just, what's up with the slapstick kind of humor? Is that in the same vein, or is it in a completely different category?
Everyone gets tickled at different vibrations, and that's the thing. I mean, there's different levels, which I know is something you'd like to speak about today, different levels in which we perceive this reality. No one is better than the other. Sometimes slapstick really gets me, sometimes I could care less. Sometimes I think it's kind of stupid or silly, and I believe that's when my mind starts to edit, and I'm not allowing myself to just be my playful, childlike self, and I'm concerned as to whether or not someone's going to judge me because I think that's funny, in my company that's involved, and then I'm not truly being free in the moment, because most likely I might laugh if I'm just by myself and I'm not judging and I'm not this and I'm not blah, blah, blah.
Have to be politically correct.
Right, yeah, and so I think a lot of the levels at which we allow humor in have more to do with our self-editing of what we think others are going to think about us if we find that funny.
So our own laughter can be a little bit of a window to our own soul.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I heard a famous, of course his name is escaping me now, but a comedian describe what humor is during a workshop, and his take was that it's all about self-loathing. I wonder if you could speak to that for a moment.
Well, I think many of us feel like we're very alone, and that some of our concerns and our worries and our things that we're not allowed to express because we're supposed to be strong, we're supposed to be all these certain ways, that through humor we can touch on a commonality. And that the humorist or the comedian will speak to things that are unspeakable, if you will. speak to vulnerabilities or intimacies that we don't normally communicate about, things we think about all the time but we never share with somebody else. And so he becomes the person who is like the representative of our subconscious.
Beautiful.
And what he's thinking. And we live kind of vicariously and then realize that other people have the exact same thoughts, and so we're kind of acknowledging, if you will, in a group consciousness, in a consensus reality, well, yeah, I think that way too. Oh my God, can you believe that? And it gives us a freedom to be our true selves. There's not that it gives us the acceptability. It gives us a sense of affirmation that our subconscious jabbering or gibberish that's going on in our brains is normal. That we're not alone, that we're not crazy, that we're not wrong in some way.
Well, I like that you brought up subconscious. This is a area that I really want to get into. Bruce Lipton, for example, has spoken and written eloquently about how there is an incredible vastness in the subconscious. So much so, in his analogy, 1 pixel on a screen, on a computer screen, may represent your actual conscious mind, and the rest of it is the subconscious mind. I wonder if you could give us some insight on how, and the best way, perchance, to access that genius and creativity and humor and life force that's wrapped up and locked away in the subconscious mind.
The first way is to realize that you have that capability. Because our training is that you don't. Our training is all about memorization and regurgitation of a bunch of information and formulas and understandings and history and all this other kind of stuff. If you're a good regurgitator, then you're educated. But it really taps into intuition, and intuition is part of the creativity thing and has to do with that, because intuition, I explain, is knowing without reason, knowing without explanation. You just know. You just understand something, and you see that's not allowed in our society. That's not allowed in our upbringing, because you have to be able to explain yourself. You have to be able to explain your decisions, your choices. And if you can't, if for some reason you're going to make a decision and you simply can't explain it to someone, there's something wrong with you. You're bad. You're wrong. Our entire training. I mean, from our parents, why did you do that? Right? To the teachers, well, what were your considerations? To our bosses, what were you thinking? Kind of thing. And when it goes bad, or goes awry, or didn't work out the way others think it should have, then we were like all messed up. But if something great happens, then all of a sudden we're seen as, wow, that was amazing. How did they do that? How did they do that? But how many of us have had this situation? I mean, for myself, that you didn't do what you knew you should have done, and sure enough, something just crashes, or or you do what you couldn't explain, and something miraculous occurs, some synchronicity, some incredible opportunity arises. And so ultimately, learning to trust that intuitive self. Now, how we lost that, I mean, in my opinion, how we were kind of bred out is several hundred years ago, when we had all the witch hunts and the missionaries were coming through. I mean, when we took the magic out of intuition, when we took the qualitative nature out of geometry, when we took the magic out of chemistry, we used to have alchemy, and we took the magic out, and that just became this mathematical equation and relationship between substances, but there was no magic, if you will. There was no intuition involved. The same thing with geometry. We turned it into this science. And as we began to do that, we then, as a species, began to demand that all human beings either be able to answer their understandings biblically or answer their understandings scientifically. And if they couldn't answer their understandings of the universe either biblically or scientifically, they were considered a witch. And 14 million intuitive people, at least, were murdered as a result. And so intuition kind of went out of style, you might say.
Not very popular.
And I believe that it's emerging again. I truly believe that that is what's coming back. It's almost an equal and opposite reaction, and that all of society is waking up to that intuitive self. They know deep down inside. You know, they'll watch a documentary, they'll watch something that's happening, and they'll say, "Well, I know that. Oh yeah, I've thought that." And it's this deep remembering, this deep kind of cultural, species remembering of the truth, speaking to the truth in our hearts, and that's really what I'm witnessing happening on the planet right now.
You brought up the T word. It's a heavily charged word, truth. What really is truth?
Truth is what is. My children asked me at a young age, "Daddy, why do the hills," we're driving in the car, "Daddy, why do the hills go up and down when we're driving?" And I asked, "Well, do you want the truth of the story?" And he said, "Well, we want both." And I said, "Okay." You know? And I said, "Well, the reason why the hills go up and down in front of us while we're driving is because they do. That's the truth."
I can imagine you've been a very unsatisfying father.
Well, and the story is that because we have these plates of earth that are coming together and forcing the peaks to occur and all this other kind of stuff. The truth is what is, not a reflection or an explanation or a story about what is. So the truth is we have starvation on the planet. The truth is that we are expressing our suppressed anger at each other as human beings through war, through greed. The truth is, and these are things that we can just literally look at the truth of what's happening. And then the story is the justification for it. The validation that why I'm justified in doing it. But the truth is that it's occurring, and as a result of it occurring, we need to stop. It's like my kids would be fighting or something like that, and she took my I said, "Okay, well, stop. But what's the truth?" I walked into the room and I took her toy and she didn't like it. Okay?
Which is a story as well.
Right. But we're closer to the reality of what occurred, kind of like war is happening. And so we could cut through the story well, I wanted to play with the toy, and we just got to it. I took her toy. Okay. Did she like that? No. Okay. Should we maybe not do that, or should we ask next time? Yes. Okay, good. And we would just cut through the crap and just be done with it. And it's very much like the Dalai Lama. When the Dalai Lama was at the UN, and it was just absolutely brilliant. He's addressing the UN. And there he is, and he says, okay, obviously, for all these thousands of years, we've been unable to, agree on religion. All right? That's pretty obvious. So he's speaking the truth, okay? As a species, apparently we are unable to agree on religion. And he says, and also, it appears to be true that for these thousands of years, we've been unable to agree on politics. Right? So he says, what I hold to be true is that we've not proven to be able to agree on religion or politics. He says, so maybe, can we just all agree to be nice to each other? Let's just start there. Let's just start there.
What an original thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So truth, in my opinion, is the objective observation of what is. And then when it becomes subjective, we get what Stephen Colbert says is truthiness.
Another original thinker.
Which is the spin of truth for your particular purpose. It's taking the truth and twisting your explanation of it so that it serves your personal purpose. And that would be truthiness. But for me, it's one of the things that kind of drives me up the wall is that we've got so much story, and the truth is the truth. I mean, it's just I could never understand as a kid, why are we fighting? Why are we? I mean, for me, I could just see it, and I would say to people know what's right. Oh no, they don't. I think they do. But we've been numbed. I mean, between the heavy metal toxicity that's in our body, between the fluoridation that's in our water, between the processed foods that we eat, between all the different concepts and stories of justification and classifications of our lives, and then our whole identification with our material world, and the identification with, your self-worth is measured by how many widgets you can produce in so much time, and if you can produce a lot of widgets, you're worth more, and if you produce a little, you're not worth a lot. I mean, all of these measurements, in fact, as opposed to just you're a beautiful, incredible human being, worthy of love, worthy of everything, just because you're alive.
There are those who claim that no truth can be spoken. How do you respond to that?
Well, this gets into the levels levels of dimension, the levels of perception, and it's something that I've struggled with, or have had to spend a lot of time contemplating, because being dead for 10 minutes the first time, but then the second time 12 hours, being out of my body for 12 hours, I experienced some things that I don't know. I haven't met anyone who's experienced what I experienced. I've met a lot of people who have had near-death experiences, but that's very different than death experience. And so frequently I feel very alone on this planet, very alone. Because I can express kind of conceptually what I experienced, but until you've experienced it, you don't have the knowledge of it. And there's many things that are untouchable by words, untouchable by our ability to perceive them through our mind and through our senses. And so the ultimate truth is beyond the mind, and if the ultimate truth is beyond the mind, that means it's beyond explanation, it's beyond words, it's beyond... And so one of the things that I really have worked diligently on is finding different metaphors, different imagery, different concepts that can somewhat attempt to convey the infinite understanding and true experience of our oneness. And I have a difficult time also talking about my whole death experience sometimes, because what happens is that, like, you and I will start talking about it, and what we're really doing is we're going into my past experience over here, so that then maybe you can project into the future what's going to happen to you, when the truth of the matter is the only place life is occurring is right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm hesitant to go off into the past or into the future and what have you, because here we are. It's the only place where life is actually occurring.
Sounds like your words are nibbling around the edges of this word that we brought up earlier, enlightenment. And it sounds like in the process of enlightenment is this wave form of enlightening. And it's hard to frame this in a question because words are just so inaccurate. But would you say you're enlightened?
I would say I'm enlightening. I would say that I'm constantly open to making everything that I've ever learned antiquated every day. In other words, I hold nothing to be absolute. Even my death experience and what I had there, I'm open to realize that what I experienced, where I went, what I had, happened in that time frame. Because my 12 hours there felt like 4 or 5 lifetimes in that time dimension, literally. And then came back, and all of a sudden I'm back in Earth time. It was just like, whoa.
But I'm going to ask you the easiest question in the entire interview here. This one should go over the fence.
Okay.
What is the meaning of life?
Whatever you want it to be. I'd have to ask who's asking the question. What is the thing that's asking the question?
Mm-hmm.
And then why is it necessary to have that understanding?
So you want to ask who's asking the question,
Yeah.
so that you know which level to answer?
No, so that I defeat the fact that this thing that is actually asking the question will never get will never get an answer. Because this thing that's asking the question is a brain, is a mind. And as long as we think, see, we have this ultimate question, what is the meaning of life? And that's going to, somehow if we can find that meaning of life, then all of a sudden we're going to be at peace, and everything's going to be beautiful, because I understand the meaning of life. But all of that exists solely as this mental exercise that's going on. And the moment you let go of that mental exercise, then you are the meaning of life. You aren't seeking, you become. You're an active participant in the meaning of life. But to define it and say that is the meaning of life is changing every single moment for all of creation. The most kind of esoteric answer I could say is that we're all, it's love attempting to understand itself in order to create more love. That would be the most kind of esoteric answer I could answer in this moment. But the seek for the meaning of the life is probably, the seeking of the meaning of life is one of the greatest obstacles to one's enlightening.
I think inherent in the question is a flaw.
Right.
The word meaning is saying, well, I want to put it in a box. I
Right.
want to have thinking. I
Yeah.
want to analyze. I want to be totally divorced
Right.
from life,
Yeah.
so that suddenly now I can understand life.
Yeah.
And understand rather than experience.
Right.
So
It depends on your filter.
I'm so glad you didn't beat me up for the question. You have a lot of friends. A couple. And those of us that know you well know you to be incredibly driven, motivated, passionate. There's absolutely nothing that you do, at least in my experience, that isn't huge or big. You don't just find yourself homeless on the street and say, I'm going to wash windshields for a couple of bucks and get a hamburger and that's it. No. 2 years later, you've got a multi-million-dollar window washing firm, and it's off the charts. Whatever it is, you find the chart, you define the chart, and then it's it's like, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to invent a new chart,
Yeah.
So there's some passion and inspiration and some maybe a little bit of genius and stuff all wrapped up into this thing. And the real question here is, what in the world is motivating you?
Yeah.
What inspires you?
The birth of my children really was a deep, deep inspiration, delivering them at home, and realizing when this life form came in that this world we live in and the environment I create for them is going to affect the entire world, the entire universe. And each one of my children I chose, I wanted. I know the conception date of each of my children. So none of them were like a aha or a surprise or, rubber baby as they call them, Oops. And they became my litmus for whether or not I was generating a reality where they could experience their true and authentic self and be an expression of love. That's a huge part of my kind of mental motivation for life. I can come up with all different types of concepts from various teachers. Gandhi said the way you find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Tony Robbins talks about that inspiration comes from doing something bigger than yourself. I kind of came into this world realizing that things were not right. From as early as I can remember. And kind of the mental makeup, which is really interesting. You know, I grew up with an alcoholic father. And those who have alcoholic parents realize that there's this you do everything you can because of the eggshells that you live on to try and please them. Try and do something right, something great, but you never can do it. But you're always trying and always trying and trying. So there was this deep kind of seeking of acceptance and love and all this kind of stuff that was kind of, I imagine, from very early age, before even cognition, that I was thrust into this modality of being in order to try and keep peace in the home. Which, in a lot of ways, was all messed up. Because I'm driven to subjugate myself and my needs in order to take care of everyone else's. Yet the wiring, there's nothing wrong with trying to take care of everyone's needs, but really the reason I was doing it was I was trying to avoid pain, trying to avoid shame, and so my whole life was about avoiding things. So I had to be super Joe, always have the right answer, always have the right conclusions, always have the solutions, always this kind of stuff. And so once I was able to kind of reconcile the pain and the motivation of being accepted, I was still left in the modality of the wiring in my being that's kind of who I am. And so kind of through the tragedy of being, the child of an alcoholic, I found myself now in this position where I'm really capable of making really cool stuff happen. And so it's kind of like a byproduct, of that. But what inspires me today is a smile, someone just smiling, eye contact, two people being vulnerable, two people agreeing that we have no idea what's going on here, but let's just keep it peaceful and beautiful. What inspires me is the letters, the little notes that people send me on Facebook or YouTube, or getting letters. I mean, I've got dozens of them now, literally, where people were either hours away from suicide or seriously contemplating that reality, who watched my Mechanics of Mind Control videos on Google.
Absolutely.
Who, as a result of seeing those videos, attribute their still being alive and now living expressive, expansive lives.
Dear Dr. Joe, I'm writing to say thank you for saving my life. Just hours before I planned to end this experience, a friend called and said they were coming right over to show me this great video they found. I was not in the mood at all, but a few minutes later they showed up at my door, let themselves in, and proceeded to sit down on my couch with a computer. Watching some video with my crazy friend Daniel was the last thing I wanted to be doing. But there he was, and I figured I would just have to continue with my previous plans after he left. Well, I'm happy to say, Dr. Joe, that was a year and a half ago. I'm very much alive, and I'm not only surviving, I'm thriving and expanding continuously in repeatlessness. Your videos spoke directly to my soul and freed me from the entanglement of thoughts that were leading me to want to take my life. Thank you for your generosity in freely sharing this information with the world. I've often wondered if I would have ever seen the videos if they were not free and available as they are online. So thank you, Dr. Joe Marshalla. My husband, Daniel, thanks you, and our child due next month thanks you. You're 1 in a billion, and I owe my life to your dedication, sincerity, and service. Namaste. Renee S., Chicago, Illinois.
You've got an incredible webpage. You've got all kinds of products. You've got videos. You've been helping people all over the planet. You've had these letters coming in. Thank you for saving my life. You've made the incredible difference. On and on and on and on. So you're making a lot of money off of this thing, aren't you?
Oh yeah, not at all. I mean, really, I'm not. People think that. I made a decision many years ago that it was more important to get this information out there to help the transformation of the planet than it was for me to, quote unquote, try and capitalize off it. In fact, one of the things that just drives me up the wall are these, idolized neo-gurus who are selling dependency on their systems and their self. If there's anything that I'm about, it's about take this information, be completely independent, and empower yourself. Don't look to me. I mean, if there's anything I am, I'm an iconoclast. It's not about putting anyone up on any pedestal, because the moment you put someone up there, it puts you down. And if you put yourself down, that means you can't achieve that. You can't. You are. I mean, it's not even a matter that you can't achieve that. That you aren't that. There's the inherent belief that you are not that. When in fact, that's the essence of every human being. To be anything. And so I gave all my information away. Now 90%, at least 90% of everything I've ever done, I'm just giving away.
So you've got, I think, millions of viewers.
20 million viewers. And so what I did is I decided, okay, I'm going to put out, maybe some people, I wrote a little thing under each one of the videos. If this has been a positive influence in your life, if you could donate $1, just $1, right? And I thought, because there's over 20 million views, but there's over 17 million downloads. So that means that these people didn't just click on it and then turn it off. They actually took the time to put it on their computers in order to either watch it at a later date or be able to, watch it over and over and over. And so if every single one of those people had given me at least 25 cents, and just a quarter, I'd have somewhere between $2 million and $2.5 million to create more product, to invest in green technologies, to put on free workshops and seminars, to share.
So what have you gotten back?
$280. I think $283.
So that basically covers your internet bill for a month.
That's about it. And it was just really interesting. I had greater hope for humanity that they'd share a little bit, but but I'm not even upset about it. I mean, it was a social experiment. I put it out there. It was an invitation, and if it didn't come back, that's cool because I'm taken care of. I mean, there's a lot of people who help me out, and not necessarily financially, but I don't own a car. Someone lent me a motorcycle, so I'm doing that. I don't own a home. I worked out a trade where I built this cabin, and now I get to live in that cabin for free. I chose to make my burn rate, if you will, very little. I mean, for less than $500 a month, I'm living. And that's pretty good in this, and I'm not living like a pauper.
Well, let's talk about finances for a minute, just for fun. You've been incredibly wealthy, and there have been times in your life where you've been virtually penniless. Mm-hmm. And you've been up and you've been down, you've been all over, you've lived life huge and large.
Yeah.
But when it comes to abundance, when it comes to manifesting and creating and this law of attraction and all of that stuff that we hear today, if you can distill it down into a lesson or a couple of lessons or a few little bullet points, what have you learned about all of this continuum of finance in, finance out, and living large and so forth?
The deepest understanding that I have gleaned is that when I need, I am provided, and if I'm not provided, I didn't need. In other words, it's kind of a barometer that I'm heading in the right direction. It's like when I'm genuinely giving and being of service, selfless service to humanity, then all is provided. The moment I become selfish, The moment that my any type of greed or any type of self-motivation for, that kind of thing comes in, then all of a sudden the flow stops. And there's been times where, like, the greed and a clever idea amassed lots of money. And because that was the motivation, I think it was balanced and then removed. So money is an energy. I kind of think of life is not to be saved. Life is to be spent. Your very life. To spend your life. Spend your life experiencing the trees. Smelling the roses. Smelling the, as they say. And the same is true with money. There's no security in this world. There's no such thing as security. 10 hours, or 10 years, 10 weeks, 10 hours, 10 minutes, 10 seconds, 10 nanoseconds before I died, I had no idea I was going to die. There was no indication like a warning, death is coming. No, it was just, poof, it's gone. It's gone. The only real security, if there is anything that would be considered security, is not laying up your treasures where doth and moth corrupt. Our words from this brother Jesus here were pretty profound in that regard. That I'm a very wealthy man because I have no desire to amass and accumulate anything. And I'm free. They say that wealth provides freedom. Money is a source of freedom. But, the more money you have, the more responsibility you have, the more concerns you have, the more all these different types of things. There is a cost to having a lot of money. And it's an emotional cost. It's an energetic cost. It's a mental cost. And to be free of that, it would be really interesting to have massive amounts of money and to be free of any identification with it. That might be like the ultimate in this third dimension. But to be free of it, the key element there is to be free of it. To be free of the identification, to be free of the idea that you are limited if you don't have any. When I made those mechanical mind control videos, right? I had very little money. Very little. Talked to a friend who owned the bookstore. He said, "Hey, you want to do a lecture?" I said, "Sure." Got out my video camera, put it in the back of the room, did the lecture. 20 million people are helped. And the whole thing was the lecture time and then maybe 20 hours of editing. So I did that 3 times. So I got about 60 hours of editing.
$280.
Yeah, $280. Right, yeah. So here we do the math, And, but my wealth really is that I'm helping to make a difference.
Yes.
When I was a young child, like 4 or 5 years old, there was that public service announcement on pollution, where you see the Indian up on the bluff and the highways driving by, and you see this, and it says, "People start pollution, people can stop it." And you see the tear coming down the Indian's eye. And whoever thought of that definitely tuned into my soul.
Yes.
Because I couldn't have been more than 5 years old when I first saw that on Saturday morning cartoons. And it was from that moment that I realized that I have an effect. And it's from that moment forward that I have never littered. I have never thrown something out a window or dropped something on the ground my entire life. Never. And I continue that today. Then I helped to establish recycling in Seattle, which is now the model program, curbside recycling throughout the entire world. Right? And I realized that I can either be a cancer on this planet, like a virus that's just consuming and taking from the resources, or I can be like a fertilization machine. that is fertilizing, creating greater fertile soil for things to grow and expand. And I choose the latter. It's the only reason I can justify my existence here. And when I look, why am I here? What function does this serve? To be a human being on the planet. And the only thing I can come up with that's halfway reasonable.
The meaning of life.
Yeah, well, is to uplift and nurture all life. To be a vehicle through which the upliftment and nurturing of all life can occur. If I have a free will, and I'm going to assert that, that's the function of this energetic that we call Joe Marshalla. I can't figure out any other reason. There's no way I'm going to be just a consumer of the resources. It makes me sick to my stomach thinking of being that way.
Let's rewind the clock a little bit in your life. Let's wind it way back. You remember going to school, and we're getting to the piled high question here because it's pretty deep, as I understand. You have this two little letters in front of your name that occasionally show up. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. You don't seem to put a lot of emphasis on it, but it's clearly something that you have spent a huge portion of your energy, your life, and your resources on. So what have you learned about learning? What have you learned about this whole milieu of going through the hoops and all of that and acquiring this knowledge?
The key element that I've learned throughout all of that, the only reason I even got a PhD,
They're on sale?
You're right. Yeah, get 5 for $6, right? Is because society requires those letters to you to have something, to be able to have something significant to say. In other words, just if I was just Joe, people are less likely to hear what I have to say because I got those 3 letters now and have that accomplishment. Well, he's put in some time, and now it's this value, it's this worth that we put on people. And the truth of the matter is that knowledge and all of that type of stuff is available to every single human being.
So if you were just Gandhi, it wouldn't...
Oh, he was a lawyer.
Yeah.
He was a respected lawyer. Martin Luther King was a doctor of divinity. Jesus, well, he was the son of God. I mean, that's a pretty good...
He was the head of the Carpenters Union.
S.O.G. Jesus.
You gotta have these letters,
Excuse me. So, in answer to your question, if I've learned anything, is that no one can teach you anything. That our entire lives we have taught ourselves everything. Someone may have shown you something, but it was your application of that information whereby you taught yourself. And that a lot of academia, a lot of our schools, the whole system is devised that you need the system in order to learn. When all they're doing is charging you an exorbitant amount of money for everything that you could find in the library. And fortunately now we have the internet, whereby people like myself, who've gone through the whole dance over there, are now just giving the information out for free. There's tons of us. And we have to, unfortunately, in this third dimension, buy food and pay for gas and heating and electricity and things like that. I'm attempting myself to be completely self-sufficient so that I can lower that burn rate so that we have to make some money. So I sell a book, and I make some money off of that. I do a lecture, I make some money. I teach classes, I make a little bit of money. My classes, the class I teach, a 2-day class called, Empowerment Program. Now we're calling it the Frequency of Empowerment. It's a 2-day class. When I first started teaching that class, it was $4,000 per participant for a 2-day class.
Okay, so no one showed up. Then what happened?
Well, actually, when that happened, people did show up.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of people who wanted that. who obviously couldn't afford that. And I was being told that you really need to charge something of that nature to get people really understand the value. And if they're going to let go of that money, they're going to set themselves up for success. You know what I mean? Because they're going to really glean value out of it. And then, but now, I mean, I teach the class and it's $400.
And now nobody shows up.
No, people do show up. I mean, but the key element, I mean, to be able to spend 2 days. I mean, my counseling rate, like if I'm going to be working one-on-one with someone, the base rate is, $250 an hour. Because what you get done with me in 1 hour is like what you might get done in 6 weeks to 8 weeks in other kind of therapy programs. And I don't take on a lot of clients. I'm not like the cookie cutter machine, assembly line therapist who purposely, in so many ways, I mean, I've seen it so many times, elongate the whole therapeutic process so they can guarantee that this percentage of their rent or this percentage of their power, percentage of their income is going to be, sustained for a period of time. I'm just like, here's your life, here's your empowerment, go on, don't give me any more money. And, I mean, it's not a sustainable, model in that regard, but it's okay. It's okay. Anyway, so, to spend $200 to spend an entire day with everything I've ever learned for 2 days, so $200 a day to get everything I've ever learned downloaded and then activated in your life, I think it's pretty reasonable.
Sounds like a bargain.
And it's pretty reasonable.
You get your life back for $400.
Right.
When you were a little boy, something happened, and you wound up dying. And
that was a near-death out-of-body, yeah.
Yeah. And it changed your life in a profound way, and at some point you decided that you needed to have some answers. And at some point you started reading everything you could get on every religion, every type of belief system there is in the world.
Yep.
And I would venture to say you haven't stopped doing that. Mm-hmm. You're still reading.
Yeah.
So we're kind of going into that part of the interview where we talk about these death experiences and what it means to you. But let's start with the study of the various religions and spiritual natures. And you've been to India, and you've done all kinds of interesting things. If the elevator door is shutting and the other person says, "Oh, by the way, Joe, what religion are you?" and you've got, what do you say? What religion are you, Joe?
I'm all of them.
Yeah. You always give very unsatisfying answers.
I'm not a religion. Religion is based on belief.
Yeah. And
I don't believe anything. I am everything. Belief takes you, you're so far away from the moment. It's all in this thing called time and the mind. People have asked me that, do you really believe that? Do you really, and it's like, no, I don't believe that at all. I am it. And so I believe in no religion. I am all the religion.
So what is God?
The grand organized design. What isn't God? In what language? Ram? The unspeakable? G-D? Ra? Jah? They're all referring to the same unifying force. There's nothing that isn't. And so that's why I call it, the grand organized design. And so then people say, then what's soul? What's your soul? Right?
I wasn't going to ask that.
Okay, well then we won't go there.
But as long as you brought it up.
It's an energetic. As my friend John, I got to give John DeMartini,
your buddy.
My buddy. But soul is if we were to define a soul, it's an energetic, right? And so soul, S-O-U-L, is a description of that energetic. And what I believe the soul is the spirit of unconditional love. That's what the soul is.
We need to put this into a seminar.
And if it isn't, if it's conditional, it's not love. There's any conditions.
It's manipulation.
It's not love.
Yeah.
The only condition of love is that it's unconditional, if you were going to put a condition on it. But even the moment you even put unconditioned in it, it's separating it,